Colton Mercer's hand froze midair, the coin slipping through his fingers and hitting the dirt. His 3 sons stood behind him, 7 years old, identical faces streaked with tears. The beggar woman looked up from the ground, her hollow eyes meeting his. And in that moment, Colton felt his heart stop beating. Because he knew that face. He had buried that face 3 years ago. He had mourned that face. He had tried to forget that face every single night since the river took her away. If you want to know how this impossible moment happened, subscribe to my channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Colton Mercer learned early that a man who shows weakness don't survive Wyoming territory. His daddy taught him that. The land taught him that. And the day he pulled his wife's shawl from that river, tangled up in branches and soaked through with mud, he learned it all over again. 3 years since that day. 3 years of running the biggest cattle ranch in Carbon County. 3 years of raising 3 boys alone, each one looking more like her every morning. That Sunday started like any other. Church bells fading behind him. Sun burning white and mean. Colton walked down Main Street in Bitter Creek with his boys trailing close. Caleb, Samuel, and Eli. 7 years old, born within minutes of each other, couldn't tell them apart unless you knew where to look. Caleb had a small scar on his chin from falling off the porch. Samuel's left ear sat a little lower than the right. Eli, the youngest by 4 minutes, had their mama's habit of humming when he was nervous. "Stay close," Colton said without looking back. "Yes, sir," 3 voices answered together. Colton nodded once to Reverend Whitfield at the church door. The preacher nodded back. No small talk. Colton's mind was already on the north pasture fence and the cattle prices in Cheyenne. Problems a man could fix. Problems that didn't wake him up at night with the sound of rushing water in his ears. "Pa!" Samuel tugged at his sleeve. "What?" "Can we get penny candy at McCoy's?" "After I check on the feed order." They passed the general store where old Harold sat whittling on the porch. He lifted his knife in greeting. Colton touched his hat brim and kept walking. That's how things worked in Bitter Creek. Quick nods, no long conversations. Folks knew Colton Mercer was a man of few words and fewer smiles since his wife passed. The trading post sat at the rough end of town where the boardwalk turned to dirt. Men without steady work leaned against the wall passing a bottle back and forth. They weren't dangerous, just worn down by life and bad luck. A sound drifted through the heat. Soft humming. Broken like a song somebody couldn't quite remember. Colton heard it and dismissed it. Not his problem. Not his concern. Then Eli stopped walking. Colton took 3 more steps before he noticed the empty space beside him. He turned, irritation rising in his chest. "Eli, come on." The boy didn't move. He stood planted in the dirt, staring toward the corner of the trading post. His small hands had gone still at his sides. His face had gone pale as fresh milk. "Boy, I said..." "Pa." Eli's voice came out strange. Too quiet. Too certain. "Pa, look." Caleb and Samuel moved to stand beside their brother. All 3 boys stared in the same direction. All 3 faces carried the same impossible expression. Colton followed their gaze. A woman sat on the ground by the corner of the building, her back pressed against weathered wood. An old coat hung off her thin shoulders 3 sizes too big. Her hair was dark with streaks of gray tangled and matted. In her arms she held something, a cloth doll, lumpy and worn, stitched from scraps of faded fabric. She rocked forward and back, humming that broken tune. Colton's throat went dry. "That ain't..." he started to say. "Pa..." Caleb's voice shook. "Pa, that's Mama." The street seemed to go silent. Even the wind stopped. "What did you say?" Samuel pointed with a trembling finger. "That's Mama. That's her. Your Mama is dead." Colton heard his own voice, harsh and cracked. "You know that. We buried her." "No, sir." Eli stepped forward, his small boots kicking up dust. "You buried an empty box. You told us yourself. They never found her body." Colton grabbed his son's arm. "That woman ain't your mother. Your mother is gone." Eli looked up at him, 7 years old, but his eyes held something too old for a child. "Then why is she humming Mama's song?" The words hit Colton like a fist to the chest. He listened. The tune drifted through the air, broken and wrong, but underneath all that wrongness was something he knew. A song about a mockingbird and a diamond ring. A song Hannah used to sing every night when the boys were small. A song Colton hadn't heard in 3 years, because hearing it would have broken him apart. His legs moved before his mind caught up. One step, then another. His pulse hammered so loud he could barely think. The woman kept rocking, kept humming. She didn't look up until his shadow fell across her. Then her pale eyes lifted to his face. Colton stopped breathing. She had a thin white scar running from her left temple to her cheekbone. He knew that scar. He'd been there when she got it. 16 years old, thrown from a spooked horse near the Brennan fence line. He'd held her hand while the doctor stitched her up. He'd told her she was going to be fine, even though his own hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Mister," the woman said, her voice rough and dry, "you got a coin to spare?" Colton's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I ain't eaten since yesterday," she continued, looking down at her doll. "Don't need much, just enough for bread." Maggie. The name scraped out of his throat like broken glass. The woman's head tilted slightly. She studied him the way a person studies something they almost remember but can't quite name. "That my name?" she asked. Colton's knees nearly gave out. Behind him, the triplets moved closer. Eli reached out and touched the edge of the woman's coat. "Mama," he whispered. "It's me. It's Eli." The woman flinched. Her arms tightened around the cloth doll. Her rocking sped up. "I don't..." She shook her head. "I don't know you, boy." "Yes, you do." Caleb stepped forward, his voice cracking. "You used to sing to us every night. You used to make us biscuits with honey. You used to tell us stories about horses that could fly." The woman's face twisted. Something passed through her eyes, fear, confusion, and underneath it all, a flicker of something that might have been recognition. "I don't remember," she whispered. "I don't remember none of that." Samuel knelt down in the dirt beside her. "You got a birthmark," he said quietly. "Behind your left ear, shaped like a half moon. Pa used to kiss it every morning before he went out to work the cattle." The woman's hand trembled as it rose to touch the spot behind her ear. Her fingers found the mark. Her breath caught. Colton watched his sons do what he couldn't. He watched them reach for their mother, while he stood frozen like a coward. "Hannah." His voice came out strangled. "Hannah, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. Pale blue, just like he remembered. But the light behind them was dim, lost, like a lamp turned down too low. "I know your face," she said slowly. "I see it sometimes when I sleep, but I don't know your name." "Colton." He forced the word out. "Colton Mercer. I'm your husband." She flinched at the word husband like it carried weight she couldn't hold. "I ain't got a husband," she said. "I ain't got nothing. Just this." She clutched the doll tighter. "Just this." Colton looked at the doll, really looked at it. The fabric was faded, the stitching crude, but he recognized the pattern. Blue flowers on white cloth. The same pattern as the curtains Hannah had made for the boys' bedroom when they were babies. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "Made it." She stroked the doll's lumpy head. "Don't remember when. Don't remember why. But I made it. I know I did." Eli tugged on Colton's sleeve. "Pa, we gotta take her home." "Boy." "She's been out here, Pa." Eli's voice rose angry and scared. "She's been sitting in the dirt while we had a warm house and hot food and soft beds. She's been here and we didn't know. Colton opened his mouth to argue, to explain that this woman might not be who they thought. That grief could make a person see things that weren't there. That 3 years was a long time and memory played tricks. But then Hannah lifted her face and the sunlight caught her just right, and Colton saw her. Really saw her. Not the stranger in rags. His wife. The mother of his children. The woman he'd sworn before God to love and protect until death parted them. Except death hadn't parted them. He'd just stopped looking. Hannah. He knelt down in front of her, slow and careful, like she was a wild thing that might bolt. Do you remember the river? Her face went white. Her rocking stopped cold. Don't, she whispered. Don't talk about the water. I have to know. Do you remember the flood 3 years ago? Spring runoff came early. The bridge at Miller's Crossing gave way. Hannah's breathing turned fast and shallow. Her eyes went distant, seeing something that wasn't there. Cold? She mumbled. So cold. I was holding something. Something precious. I couldn't let go. I couldn't. Her voice broke. I was holding on to something, and then I wasn't holding anything, and then everything went dark. Colton's chest caved in. He remembered that day like a brand burned into his brain. The storm that came out of nowhere. The river rising fast. Hannah had gone to check on the Brennan family's children while he was out moving cattle to higher ground. The bridge collapsed while she was crossing. They found pieces of the bridge 7 miles downstream. They found Hannah's shawl caught on a branch near the old mill. They found her wedding ring somehow torn free, tangled in river weeds. They never found her. After 3 weeks of searching, Reverend Whitfield had come to the ranch with his hat in his hands. Sometimes the water don't give them back, Colton. Sometimes we just gotta accept what the Lord has decided. So Colton accepted it. He buried an empty coffin. He wore black for 6 months. He learned how to braid his son's hair and pack their lunches and answer their questions about why Mama wasn't coming home. He learned how to live without her by pretending she had never existed, and all that time she'd been here, lost and alone and forgotten. Pa! Caleb's voice pulled him back. Pa, you're crying. Colton touched his face. His fingers came away wet. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Hannah. He took her hand gently, feeling how cold and rough her skin had become. I'm gonna take you home. You understand, I'm gonna take you somewhere warm and safe. Hannah stared at their joined hands like she didn't understand what she was seeing. Home, she repeated. The word sounded foreign on her tongue. Our home, the ranch, you and me and the boys. Her gaze moved to the triplets, all 3 of them watching her with identical expressions of desperate hope. Boys, she whispered. Something shifted in her face, a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. I had boys. You still got 'em, Mama. Samuel reached out and took her other hand. You still got us. A sound came out of Hannah's throat. Not quite a word, not quite a cry. Something between the two, raw and broken and full of pain. A door creaked behind them. Colton turned his head. Ruth Brennan stepped out of the trading post with her apron on and her gray hair pinned back. She froze when she saw him kneeling in the dirt. Mr. Mercer, she said, voice careful and quiet. Mrs. Brennan. Ruth's eyes moved to Hannah, then to the boys. Her hand went to her mouth. Lord have mercy, she breathed. I've been feeding her for months. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Colton's jaw tightened. How long has she been here? Near a year, I reckon. Maybe longer. She just showed up one day. Never caused trouble. Never asked for more than scraps. I gave her food when I could spare it. I gave her that old coat when winter came. Ruth's voice trembled. She never told me her name. I never thought to ask. Colton looked around the street. People had started to gather. Faces he recognized from church, from town meetings, from cattle auctions. They stood at a distance, watching and whispering. All of you. His voice came out hard as iron. All of you saw her sitting here." Nobody answered. "My wife was sitting in the dirt for a year, and not one of you thought to ask who she was, where she came from, if she had family looking for her." Old Harold stepped forward from the crowd, whittling knife still in his hand. "Now hold on, Mercer. We didn't know she was your wife. We thought she was just some what?" Colton stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. "Some beggar, some crazy woman, some piece of trash not worth a second look." Harold's face reddened. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Eli tugged on his father's arm. "Pa, don't. Let's just take Mama home." Colton looked down at his son, at his wife still sitting in the dirt clutching that pathetic doll like it was the only thing holding her together. He forced himself to breathe. "You're right," he said quietly. "You're right." He bent down and lifted Hannah to her feet. She swayed too weak to stand steady. Caleb moved to one side of her and Samuel to the other, small hands gripping her coat to keep her upright. "I can walk," Hannah said, but her legs told a different story. "Let us help," Colton told her. "You don't gotta do nothing alone anymore." They started toward the horses, tied at the end of the street. The crowd parted to let them through, faces guilty and curious and embarrassed all at once. Halfway there, a voice rang out behind them. "Well, I'll be damned. The great Colton Mercer found himself a street beggar to warm his bed." Colton stopped. He knew that voice. Silas Crawford, a rancher who'd lost 3 bids to Colton over the years. A man who held grudges like other men held whiskey. "Careful, Silas." Crawford stepped out from the crowd, thumbs hooked in his belt, a mean smile on his face. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Your wife drowned 3 years ago. This woman ain't her. She's just some poor crazy fool who probably heard the story and decided to play pretend." Hannah flinched. Her grip on Colton's arm tightened. "She's got my wife's face," Colton said, voice low and dangerous. "She's got my wife's scar. She's got my wife's voice." "Lots of women got scars." Crawford shrugged. "Don't make her Mrs. Mercer." Eli stepped forward, putting himself between Crawford and his mother. 7 years old, barely reaching the man's belt buckle, but standing there like he was ready to fight. "She hummed our song," Eli said. "The one Mama made up just for us. Nobody else knows that song." Crawford looked down at the boy with contempt. "Kid songs don't prove nothing." "She's our mama." Caleb joined his brother, fists clenched. "And if you say one more word about her, you're gonna regret it." Crawford laughed. "That a threat from a 7-year-old? No." Colton moved so fast Crawford didn't have time to react. One moment he was standing there laughing. The next Colton had him by the collar, lifting him onto his toes. "That's a threat from me." The street went dead silent. "You ever speak about my wife again?" Colton said, his voice quiet and cold as winter wind. "And they'll find pieces of you scattered across 3 counties. You understand me?" Crawford's face had gone pale. He nodded once, quick and jerky. Colton let him go. Crawford stumbled back, nearly falling. "Let's go," Colton said to his family. "We're done here." He lifted Hannah onto his horse, steadying her when she swayed. The triplets climbed onto their own mount, Caleb holding the reins, while Samuel and Eli sat behind him. They rode out of Bitter Creek without looking back. But Colton could feel the town's eyes on them the whole way, and he knew with a certainty that sat heavy in his gut that this was just the beginning. Crawford wasn't the kind of man who forgot a humiliation, and a woman who couldn't remember her own name made an easy target.
Chapter 4.
The road home stretched long and quiet. Hannah sat rigid in the saddle in front of Colton, her body tense as wound wire. She hadn't spoken since they left town. "You doing all right?" Colton asked. "Don't know." Her voice came out flat. "Don't know what all right feels like anymore." The triplets rode close, watching their mother like she might disappear if they looked away. "Mama," Samuel spoke up, "do you remember our names?" Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head slowly. I'm Samuel. That's Caleb. And that's Eli. We're triplets. Triplets. Hannah repeated the word like she was testing its weight. 3 boys. Born together. Yes, ma'am. I remember. She trailed off, her brow furrowing. I remember pain. So much pain. And then crying. Lots of crying. 3 different cries. Caleb leaned forward in his saddle. That was us. Being born. You always said we came into the world loud and we ain't been quiet since. Something almost like a smile flickered across Hannah's face. Just for a second. Then it was gone. The ranch came into view as the sun started dropping toward the hills. The main house stood white against the darkening sky. The barn sat solid and red behind it. Cattle dotted the far pastures like scattered stones. Hannah's breath caught. I know this place, she whispered. I see it when I sleep. Colton's arms tightened around her. Welcome home. They rode into the yard. Ranch hands stopped their work to stare. Jesse Crow, the foreman, stepped out of the barn with his hat in his hands. His weathered face showed nothing, but his eyes went wide when he saw Hannah. Boss. Jesse's voice was careful, measured. That who I think it is? It is. Jesse didn't move for a long moment. Then he turned his head and spoke to the hands gathered behind him. Get back to work, all of you, and not a word about this to anyone in town. You hear me? Not one word. The men scattered. Colton helped Hannah down from the horse. Her legs buckled. He caught her, holding her up. Easy, I got you. Hannah looked up at the house. At the porch, where a worn rocking chair sat empty. At the windows where lamplight was starting to glow. I sat there, she said softly. In that chair, watching the sunset, waiting for someone. Waiting for me. Colton's voice cracked. You used to sit there every evening watching for me to come home from the pastures. Hannah's hand trembled as she reached toward the porch rail. I want to remember, she whispered. I want to remember so bad it hurts. The triplets gathered around her. Eli took her hand. Caleb moved to her other side. Samuel stood close behind, like he could protect her from the world just by being there. You will, Mama, Eli said. We're going to help you remember everything. Hannah looked down at her sons, at their identical faces, full of hope and fear and love. 3 boys, she said again. I had 3 boys. You still do, Caleb told her. And we ain't going nowhere. Colton guided them toward the porch steps. Each one Hannah took felt like a victory. Each one felt like a step back from wherever she'd been lost. At the door, she stopped. What if I can't? She asked, her voice barely audible. What if I never remember? Colton turned her to face him. He looked into those pale blue eyes, dim and lost, but still hers. Still the eyes of the woman he'd loved for 15 years. Then we start over, he said. Day by day. Memory by memory. And if you never get them all back, then we make new ones. Better ones. Hannah stared at him for a long moment. Why? She finally asked. Why would you do that for a stranger? Because you ain't a stranger. Colton's voice broke on the words. You're my wife, the mother of my children, the best thing that ever happened to my sorry life. And I let you down once. I ain't gonna let you down again. A single tear slid down Hannah's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. I believe you, she whispered. I don't know why, but I believe you. Colton opened the door and led her inside. The front room smelled like wood smoke and soap and old memories. Hannah stood in the middle of it, turning slowly, taking in every detail. The quilt folded on the back of the sofa. The fireplace with its mantel full of photographs. The kitchen doorway where pots hung on hooks just like she'd arranged them years ago. Oh, she breathed. The word came out like a prayer. Eli pointed to a photograph on the mantel. That's our family mama, before the flood. That's you and Pa and us. Hannah moved toward it like she was drawn by invisible strings. She picked up the frame with shaking hands and stared at the image. A woman with dark hair and bright eyes smiled out of the photograph. 3 small boys sat on her lap. A tall man stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder. "That's me," Hannah said wonderingly. "That was me." "That's still you," Samuel told her. Hannah traced the woman's face with one finger. "She looks happy." "You were," Colton said quietly. "We all were." Hannah set the photograph down carefully. She turned to face her family, the husband she couldn't remember, the sons she'd somehow forgotten. "I want that back," she said. Her voice was stronger now, more certain. "I want to be her again. You will be Mama." Caleb moved to stand beside her. "We're going to help you." Outside, the sun had dropped below the hills. Darkness crept across the valley like something waiting. And in the town of Bitter Creek, Silas Crawford sat in the saloon nursing his whiskey and his humiliation. "He thinks he can embarrass me in front of the whole town," Crawford muttered to the man beside him. "He thinks he can bring some crazy woman home and call her his wife." "Let it go, Silas." The bartender set down another glass. "Mercer ain't the kind of man you want as an enemy." "Maybe," Crawford knocked back his whiskey. "But that woman ain't right in the head. Everyone could see it. And a woman like that," he smiled slowly. "A woman like that can be taken away, put somewhere safe, for her own good, of course." He signaled for another drink. "I know some people in Cheyenne, county people, the kind who handle situations like this." The bartender's face went pale. "Silas, you don't mean—" "I mean exactly what I mean." Crawford lifted his fresh glass in a mock toast. "Let's see how the great Colton Mercer handles losing his wife twice." He drank deep and smiled into the darkness. Hannah woke up screaming. The sound tore through the house like something wild and wounded. Colton was out of bed before his eyes fully opened. His feet hitting the cold floor, his heart slamming against his ribs. He reached her room in seconds. The door was already open. The triplets stood in the hallway, faces pale in the lamplight. "Stay back," Colton ordered. He pushed inside. Hannah was pressed into the corner, her back against the wall, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her eyes were open, but they weren't seeing the room. They were seeing something else, something that lived only in her broken memory. "Cold," she gasped. "So cold. I can't breathe. I can't—" "Hannah." Colton moved slow, keeping his hands where she could see them. "Hannah, you're safe. You're home. The water's pulling me down." Her voice rose higher. "I can't hold on. I can't—" Colton knelt in front of her. He didn't touch her. He'd learned that the hard way 2 nights ago when she'd swung at him in her terror. "Look at me," he said firmly. "Hannah, look at my face." Her wild eyes found his. For a moment, she stared right through him. "Colton?" Her voice cracked. "That's right. Colton. Your husband. You're in our house. In Wyoming. The river is 3 miles away. You're safe." Hannah's breathing slowed. Her grip on her knees loosened. "I was drowning," she whispered. "I was drowning and nobody came." Colton's throat closed up. "I came. I looked for you. I swear I did." "Then why didn't you find me?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Colton had no answer. He'd asked himself that same thing every night for 3 years. "I don't know," he finally said, "but I found you now, and I ain't letting go again." Hannah stared at him for a long moment. Then something in her face shifted. Her hand reached out trembling and touched his cheek. "Your face," she murmured. "I dreamed about your face. I didn't know whose it was. I just knew it meant something." Colton caught her hand and held it against his skin. "It means everything." Behind them, a small voice spoke up. "Mama." Eli stood in the doorway, his brothers close behind. All three boys looked terrified. Hannah's eyes moved to them. Something warm flickered through the fear. "My boys," she said softly. "My three boys." "Can we come in?" Samuel asked. Hannah nodded once. They crossed the room together and settled around her like a protective wall. Caleb on her left, Samuel on her right. Eli pressed against her knees. "You're safe, Mama," Eli whispered. "We're here." Hannah's arms slowly unfolded. She pulled her sons closer, burying her face in their hair. Colton watched them and felt his heart crack open in a way it hadn't in years. He'd tried so hard to be strong, to hold everything together, to be both mother and father to three boys who needed more than he knew how to give. But watching Hannah hold them now, even with her shattered mind and trembling hands, he understood what had been missing. Them. All of them. Together. "I remember something," Hannah said suddenly. Everyone went still. "What?" Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. "This." Hannah touched his hair. "I remember brushing this. Every morning. You hated it. You said it hurt." Caleb let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "It did hurt. You pulled too hard. I was trying to get the tangles out." Hannah's brow furrowed. "You always got tangles, worse than your brothers." Samuel leaned forward. "What about me? You remember anything about me?" Hannah studied his face. Her eyes moved over his features, slowly searching. "You broke something," she said finally. "Something important. You were scared to tell me." Samuel's jaw dropped. "The vase. Grandma's vase. I knocked it off the table when I was 5. Did I get angry? No." Samuel's voice cracked. "You hugged me and said we'd keep it between us. You never told Pa." Hannah's eyes moved to Colton. "I kept secrets from you." "Good ones," Colton said. "Always good ones." Eli tugged on his mother's sleeve. "What about me?" Hannah looked at her youngest son, the one who'd been the first to recognize her on that dusty street. "You," she said slowly. "You were always watching, always quiet. You saw things other people missed." Eli's chin trembled. "I saw you, Mama. In town. I knew it was you, even when nobody else did." Hannah pulled him close. "You found me. I wasn't going to let you be lost no more." The first gray light of dawn crept through the window. Hannah's eyes grew heavy. The terror had passed, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Sleep," Colton told her. "We'll be right here." "Promise?" "I swear it." Hannah's eyes closed. Within minutes, her breathing deepened. The triplets stayed pressed against her, unwilling to move. Colton sat in the chair by the door and watched his family sleep. He didn't close his eyes until the sun was fully up. 3 days passed. 3 days of small victories and painful setbacks. Hannah remembered the taste of coffee with too much sugar. She remembered the sound of church bells on Sunday morning. She remembered a horse named Cole, who liked to steal apples. But she couldn't remember her wedding day. She couldn't remember her sons being born. She couldn't remember the flood that had stolen 3 years of her life. "Give it time," Dr. Whitmore said when Colton rode into town for advice. "The mind heals slow. Pushing her will only make it worse." How much time? Could be weeks. Could be months. The doctor paused. Could be never. You need to prepare yourself for that possibility. Colton didn't respond. He refused to accept never. On the 4th day, trouble arrived. Colton was in the barn checking on a sick calf when Jesse came running. "Boss, Ryder's coming." Colton stepped outside. 4 men on horseback were approaching from the main road. He recognized the one in front, Sheriff Tom Avery from Bitter Creek. The man looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. The man beside him was a stranger. Tall, thin, wearing a suit too fine for ranch country. He carried a leather satchel and had the look of a man who thought he was important. "Colton." Sheriff Avery tipped his hat. "We need to talk." "Then talk." The suited man dismounted first. "Mr. Mercer, I'm Wallace Pittman, representative of the Wyoming Territorial Commission for Mental Health." Colton felt his stomach drop. "What business does the commission have with me?" "We've received a report." Pittman pulled papers from his satchel. "Concerning a woman residing on your property. A woman of unsound mind." "My wife." "That remains to be determined." Pittman's voice was smooth and cold. "According to our information, this woman was found begging on the streets of Bitter Creek. She displays signs of severe mental disturbance. She cannot recall basic facts about her own identity. She was in an accident. She's healing." "Perhaps?" Pittman smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Or perhaps she's a danger to herself and others. The commission has facilities specifically designed to care for such individuals." Colton stepped forward. "You ain't taking my wife anywhere." "Mr. Mercer, I understand this is difficult." "You don't understand a damn thing." Colton's voice dropped low and dangerous. "That woman inside that house is Hannah Mercer. She's lived on this ranch for 15 years. She gave birth to my sons. Half this county came to her funeral 3 years ago." "A funeral with an empty coffin, I'm told." Colton went very still. "Who told you that?" Pittman's smile widened. "Concerned citizens." The front door opened. Hannah stepped onto the porch, the triplets closed behind her. She looked pale but steady. "What's happening?" she asked. Pittman turned to look at her. His eyes moved over her face with clinical interest. "Mrs. Mercer, how are you feeling today?" Hannah didn't answer. Her gaze fixed on the papers in his hand. "What are those?" "Nothing to worry about." Pittman took a step toward the porch. "Just some questions we need to." Eli moved in front of his mother. "You stay away from her." "Young man." "He said stay away." Caleb joined his brother. "She ain't going nowhere with you." Pittman's expression hardened. "Sheriff, I think we need to proceed with the evaluation." Sheriff Avery shifted in his saddle. He looked at Colton, then at Hannah, then back at Pittman. "I don't know about this, Pittman. She seems calm enough to me." "The calm ones are often the most dangerous." Pittman started toward the porch steps. "They can turn violent without warning." Hannah flinched. Her hand gripped the porch rail. Colton moved fast, putting himself between Pittman and the steps. "One more step and I'll put you in the ground." Pittman stopped. His smile faded. "Threatening a territorial official is a serious offense, Mr. Mercer." "So is harassing a man's family on his own land. Now get off my property before I forget my manners." Sheriff Avery cleared his throat. "Pittman, maybe we should—" "I'm not leaving without an evaluation." Pittman's voice turned sharp. "The law is clear. If there's reasonable suspicion that an individual poses a threat to themselves or the community, the commission has authority to—" "I ain't a threat." Everyone turned to look at Hannah. She stood tall on the porch, her chin lifted, her eyes clear. The trembling woman from the street was gone. In her place stood someone who remembered what it meant to be strong. "I don't know everything about who I was," Hannah said, "but I know who I am right now. I'm a mother. I'm standing in my own home, and I ain't letting some stranger in a fancy suit drag me away from my family." Pittman's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, with respect. Don't call me ma'am like we're friends." Hannah's voice cut like a blade. "I spent 3 years lost, 3 years alone, 3 years with nobody looking for me. I finally found my way home, and you want to take me away again?" She walked down the porch steps, slowly passing Colton, moving toward Pittman, until she stood directly in front of him. "Look at me," she said. "Look at my face. Do I look like a woman who's gonna hurt anyone?" Pittman hesitated. Up close, he could see what the commission report hadn't mentioned. The scars. The weathered hands. the eyes that had seen too much pain to have any interest in causing more. The report stated. I don't care what the report stated. Hannah reached out and took the papers from his hand. He was too surprised to stop her. She looked at them. Her lips moved silently as she read. Subject displays erratic behavior, she read aloud. Unable to identify family members. Shows signs of violent tendencies. She looked up. Who wrote this? Pittman reached for the papers. That's official documentation. Hannah stepped back, keeping them out of reach. Who wrote this? A concerned citizen filed the report. What's his name? Pittman's expression flickered. That information is confidential. Was it Silas Crawford? Silence. Colton felt a cold rage settle in his chest. I'll kill him. No. Hannah turned to face her husband. No, you won't. He's trying to have you committed. He's trying to... I know what he's trying to do. Hannah's voice was calm. Too calm. And killing him won't fix it. It'll just give them a real reason to take me away. She handed the papers back to Pittman. You want to evaluate me, fine. You do it here. In my home. In front of my husband and my sons. You ask me any question you want. Pittman blinked. That's not standard procedure. Make it standard. The territorial man looked at Sheriff Avery, who shrugged helplessly. He looked at Colton, whose eyes promised violence if he made the wrong move. Finally, he looked at Hannah. Very well, he said slowly. We'll conduct the evaluation here. But if I find any evidence of instability, you won't. Pittman's eyes narrowed. We'll see. They sat in the front room, Hannah in the chair by the window, Pittman across from her. Colton stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. The triplets sat on the floor near their mother's feet, refusing to leave. First question, Pittman said, pulling a notebook from his satchel. What is your full name? Hannah Marie Mercer, born Hannah Sullivan. Date of birth. Hannah hesitated, her brow furrowed. April, she said slowly. April something. The year was... She looked at Colton. 1851, he said quietly. April 14th, 1851. That's right. Hannah nodded. April 14th. Pittman wrote something in his notebook. The date of your wedding. Hannah closed her eyes. For a long moment she was silent. Summer, she finally said. It was hot. I remember sweat on my neck. I remember thinking the dress was too heavy. The specific date. June 8th, 1874, Colton supplied. Mr. Mercer, please allow your wife to answer. She is answering. She just needs time. Pittman made another note. Mrs. Mercer, what year is it? 1887. Correct. Who is the current president? Hannah's face went blank. I haven't... She's been living on the street for 3 years, Colton cut in. She didn't exactly have access to newspapers. Pittman ignored him. Mrs. Mercer, do you know where you are? My home. The Mercer Ranch, 15 miles outside Bitter Creek. How many children do you have? 3. Hannah reached down and touched Samuel's hair. 3 boys, triplets. Their names? Caleb. She pointed to each in turn. Samuel. Eli. Eli beamed up at her. You remembered. I've been practicing. Pittman leaned forward. Mrs. Mercer, I need to ask you about the night of the flood. Hannah's body went rigid. No, Colton said immediately. You don't need to ask about that. I'm afraid I do. The trauma is clearly at the center of her condition. Then find another way to evaluate her that doesn't involve... It's all right. Colton stared at his wife. Hannah. It's all right. She met his eyes. I can do this. She turned back to Pittman. What do you want to know? Pittman's pen hovered over his notebook. What do you remember about that night? Hannah's hands gripped the arms of the chair. Rain, she said. So much rain. The river was high, too high. Someone told me the Brennan children were stranded. Did you try to reach them? Yes, I took the bridge at Miller's Crossing. What happened on the bridge? Hannah's breathing quickened. Her knuckles went white. I was halfway across. The water was... It was angry, roaring. And then... She stopped. And then... Pittman pressed. The bridge moved. Hannah's voice dropped to a whisper. It shifted under my feet. I heard wood cracking. I tried to run, but I couldn't. I couldn't. Her whole body started trembling. Mama! Eli grabbed her hand. Mama, you don't have to. I fell. Hannah's eyes had gone distant. Into the water. Into the cold. It pulled me down. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. I felt something hit my head, and then, nothing. A single tear slid down her cheek. Nothing for a long, long time. The room was silent. Pittman wrote slowly in his notebook. His face had changed. The coldness had softened into something almost like sympathy. Mrs. Mercer, he said finally, do you have any desire to harm yourself or others? No. Do you hear voices that others cannot hear? No. Do you see things that others cannot see? Only my husband's face in my dreams. Hannah lifted her chin. And I reckon that's normal enough for a married woman. Pittman closed his notebook. Everyone waited. My assessment, he said slowly, is that Mrs. Mercer is suffering from traumatic memory loss, likely caused by near drowning and possible head injury. This is not evidence of insanity. This is evidence of survival. Colton exhaled. She does not pose a threat to herself or the community. I will be recommending that the complaint be dismissed. Thank you, Hannah said quietly. Pittman stood. He looked at her with something like respect. You're a strong woman, Mrs. Mercer. Most people wouldn't have survived what you did. I had something to survive for. She looked at her sons, at her husband. Pittman nodded once and headed for the door. Sheriff Avery followed, relief plain on his face. Colton walked them out to their horses. Pittman, he said quietly. The territorial man paused. Who filed that report? Really? Pittman mounted his horse. He looked down at Colton for a long moment. I can't officially tell you that. He gathered his reins. But I can tell you that the complainant has a ranch about 3 miles east of here, and he seemed very disappointed when I wouldn't promise to remove your wife immediately. Colton's jaw tightened. Crawford. Pittman didn't answer. He just touched his hat brim and rode away. That night, Colton sat on the porch watching the darkness. Hannah came out and settled in the chair beside him. You should be resting, he said. Can't sleep. She pulled her shawl tighter. Too many thoughts. They sat in silence for a while. Crawford ain't gonna stop, Colton finally said. I know. He's got money, connections. He'll try again. Hannah's hands twisted in her lap. Then we'll fight again. He's dangerous, Hannah. So am I. Colton turned to look at her. In the moonlight, her face was pale and fierce. I spent 3 years as a ghost, she said. Nobody saw me. Nobody knew my name. I ate scraps and slept in the cold and forgot everything that made me human. She looked at him. I ain't going back to that. I ain't letting anyone take this away from me. Not Crawford, not the commission, not God himself. Colton reached over and took her hand. Then we fight together. Hannah's fingers tightened around his. Together. From inside the house, 3 small voices drifted out. We're fighting too, Eli called through the window. Eavesdropping, Colton said loudly. Again. We weren't eavesdropping, Samuel protested. We were strategically listening. Hannah laughed. The sound surprised her, surprised all of them. Get back to bed, she said. All three of you. Yes, ma'am. The voices retreated. Hannah's laughter faded, but the warmth of it stayed. I remembered something today, she said suddenly. What? Our wedding night. Her cheeks flushed in the moonlight. You were so nervous. Your hands were shaking. Colton felt heat rise in his own face. I wasn't nervous. You dropped the lamp. Twice. The lamp was faulty. Hannah smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her since she came home. Colton Mercer, she said softly. You've always been a terrible liar. He looked at her. At this woman who had been dead and wasn't, who had been lost and was found, who had been broken and was slowly, impossibly putting herself back together. Hannah Mercer, he said, you've always been the best thing in my life. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Above them, the stars burned cold and bright. And 3 miles away, Silas Crawford sat in his study, staring at a letter he'd just finished writing. A letter to Judge Horace Finch in Cheyenne. A letter about a woman who didn't deserve to keep what she couldn't remember. He sealed it with red wax and smiled. The Territorial Commission had failed. But the courts were a different matter entirely. The letter from Cheyenne arrived on a Tuesday. Jesse brought it up from town, his face grim as he handed it to Colton. The seal was official. The words inside were worse. What is it? Hannah asked from the doorway. Colton read it twice. His hands started shaking on the third pass. Court summons, he said quietly. Judge Horace Finch. He's ordered a competency hearing. Hannah went pale. A what? They want to prove you're unfit, that you can't make decisions for yourself. Colton looked up at her. If they succeed, they can take you, put you in an asylum, and I won't have any legal right to stop them. Hannah's hand gripped the doorframe. When she 3 days. The triplets appeared behind their mother. They'd heard everything. They can't do that, Caleb said. Mr. Pittman said she was fine. Pittman works for the commission. This is different. This is a judge. Colton crumpled the letter in his fist. Crawford went over everyone's heads. Hannah walked to him slowly. She took the crushed paper from his hand and smoothed it out. Judge Horace Finch, she read. I know that name. You do? I think so. Her brow furrowed. Something about him, something bad. Eli tugged on his father's sleeve. What do we do, Pa? Colton looked at his family. His wife still fragile but fighting. His sons too young to understand how cruel the world could be. We go to Cheyenne, he said, and we fight. They left before dawn the next morning. The journey took 2 days by wagon. Hannah sat in the back with the triplets wrapped in blankets against the cold. She didn't speak much. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, like she was looking for something she couldn't name. You scared? Samuel asked her on the second night. Yes. Me too. Hannah pulled him closer. Being scared ain't the same as being weak. Remember that. What if the judge takes you away? Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then you boys take care of your father, she finally said. He pretends to be strong, but he needs looking after. I heard that, Colton called from the front of the wagon. You were meant to. Despite everything, he smiled. Cheyenne was bigger than Bitter Creek, louder, more people, more buildings, more everything. The triplets pressed close to their parents as they walked through the crowded streets. The courthouse stood in the center of town, stone and brick built to look important, to look permanent. Feels like a prison, Eli muttered. It ain't, Colton said. Not yet. They found a boarding house near the courthouse and paid for 2 rooms. Hannah sat on the bed while Colton paced. We need a lawyer, he said. Someone who knows Finch. Someone who can... No. Colton stopped. What? No lawyer. Hannah's voice was calm. I'm going to speak for myself. Hannah, this is a legal proceeding. You can't just watch me. They'll twist your words. They'll try to confuse you. Then I'll untwist them. Hannah stood up and faced him. Colton, listen to me. My mind is the thing they're attacking. If I hide behind a lawyer, if I let someone else speak for me, it proves their point. It proves you're smart enough to get help. It proves I'm scared of my own voice. Hannah touched his face. I spent 3 years silent. 3 years invisible. I ain't gonna be silent now. Colton wanted to argue. He wanted to protect her the way he should have protected her 3 years ago. But looking at her face, he understood something. This wasn't about protection anymore. This was about proof. All right, he said quietly. You speak for yourself, but I'll be right there beside you. I know you will. The hearing was set for 10 o'clock the next morning. They arrived early. The courtroom was already half full. Colton recognized some faces from Bitter Creek. Word had spread fast. Silas Crawford sat in the front row, smiling like a man who'd already won. Beside him was a thin man in spectacles, shuffling through papers. That's his lawyer, Jesse muttered. He'd insisted on coming. Paid for by Crawford. Probably paid for the judge, too. Careful, Colton warned. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Judge Horace Finch entered through a side door. He was older than Colton expected. White hair, sharp eyes, a face that looked like it had never smiled in its life. All rise, the bailiff called. Everyone stood. Finch settled into his chair and looked out at the room. His gaze stopped on Hannah. Mrs. Mercer, he said, please approach. Hannah walked forward. Her steps were steady. Her chin was high. Colton's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Mrs. Mercer, Finch began, this hearing has been called to determine your mental competency. Are you aware of the charges against you? I wasn't aware being sick was a crime, Your Honor. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Finch's expression didn't change. This is not a criminal proceeding. It is an evaluation. An evaluation requested by a man who wants my husband's land. Hannah looked directly at Crawford. Ain't that right, Mr. Crawford? Crawford's smile flickered. Mrs. Mercer, Finch said sharply, you will address this court, not the gallery. My apologies, Your Honor. Hannah turned back to the judge. I'm just trying to understand why I'm here. You're here because there are concerns about your mental state. Concerns from who? Finch glanced at his papers. A citizen filed a report with the Territorial Commission. That report was dismissed, but further evidence has come to light. What evidence? The thin lawyer stood up. Your Honor, if I may. Finch nodded. The lawyer walked toward Hannah with a piece of paper in his hand. Mrs. Mercer, is it true that you were found begging on the streets of Bitter Creek? Yes. Is it true that you did not recognize your own husband when he approached you? Yes. Is it true that you cannot remember significant portions of your life, including your wedding day, the birth of your children, and the accident that caused your condition? Hannah hesitated. Some of that has come back to me. Some. The lawyer smiled. But not all. No, not all. And is it true that you experience episodes of terror, that you wake screaming in the night, that you sometimes cannot distinguish between past and present? Colton clenched his fists. The lawyer was painting a picture of a madwoman. I have nightmares, Hannah said carefully. About drowning, about the river. I reckon anyone who nearly died would have nightmares. Perhaps. The lawyer paced in front of her. But most people who nearly die don't forget who they are for 3 years. Most people don't get swept away in a flash flood and wash up 40 miles downstream with a cracked skull. The courtroom went quiet. The lawyer paused. You remember that? I remember waking up. I remember not knowing my name. I remember a family taking me in, feeding me, trying to help me remember. Hannah's voice cracked. I remember them dying of fever. I remember being alone again. I remember walking and walking because I didn't know where else to go. But you found your way back to Bitter Creek. I didn't know it was Bitter Creek. I just knew it felt familiar, like a dream I couldn't quite wake up from. The lawyer glanced at Crawford, then back at Hannah. Mrs. Mercer, you claim your memory is returning. But how can this court trust what you remember? How can we know what's real and what's confusion? Hannah was silent for a moment. Then she looked past the lawyer, past the judge, straight at Silas Crawford. I remember you, she said. Crawford's smile vanished. I didn't before, but I do now. Hannah's voice grew stronger. You came to our ranch 8 years ago, maybe 9. You wanted to buy our north pasture. Colton said no. You got angry. Crawford stood up. Your Honor, this is... You said you always get what you want. Hannah continued. You said men who stand in your way regret it. That's enough, Finch said sharply. My husband told you to get off our land. You left, but you turned around at the gate. Hannah's eyes never left Crawford's face. You said, one day, Mercer. One day you'll lose everything, and I'll be there to watch. The courtroom erupted. Order. Finch slammed his gavel. Order. Crawford was on his feet, face red. She's lying. She's making this up. Am I? Hannah turned to the gallery. Anyone here been to our ranch? Anyone here heard Silas Crawford threaten my husband? A hand went up in the back. Everyone turned. Ruth Brennan stood up slowly. The shopkeeper from Bitter Creek. The woman who'd fed Hannah for months without knowing who she was. I heard it, Ruth said. I was delivering supplies to the Mercer Ranch that day. I heard every word. Crawford's face went white. She's lying too, he sputtered. They're all... Sit down, Mr. Crawford. Finch's voice was ice. Or I'll have you removed. Crawford sat. His lawyer whispered frantically in his ear. Finch turned back to Hannah. Mrs. Mercer, you've made a serious accusation. But this hearing is not about Mr. Crawford. It's about your mental competency. With respect, Your Honor, it's about both. Hannah stepped forward. A man who threatened my family 8 years ago is now trying to have me declared insane. He filed a false report with the commission. When that failed, he petitioned this court. He wants my husband's land, and he figures the easiest way to get it is to get rid of me. Those are serious allegations. I know, and I can prove them. Finch leaned forward. How? Hannah looked at Colton. He nodded once. My husband keeps records, Hannah said. Every business dealing, every dispute, every conversation that might matter later. It's how he runs the ranch. It's how he protects our family. Colton stood up. I have letters, Your Honor, signed by Crawford, offering to buy our land. Each time I refused, the offers got more threatening. He pulled a bundle of papers from his coat. I also have a witness statement from Wallace Pittman, the territorial agent who evaluated my wife. He concluded she was of sound mind. He also noted that the original complaint was filed anonymously, but the handwriting matched a letter Crawford sent me last year demanding I sell my water rights. The courtroom exploded again. Finch banged his gavel until the noise died down. Approach the bench, he ordered Colton. Bring those documents. Colton walked forward and handed over the papers. Finch examined them slowly, his face unreadable. Crawford's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, these documents prove nothing. They could be forged. They could be, Finch agreed. But forgery is a crime. Is your client willing to submit to a handwriting analysis? The lawyer hesitated. Crawford stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. I'm not on trial here. No, Finch said coldly. Mrs. Mercer is. But if these documents are genuine, Mr. Crawford, you may find yourself in a courtroom again very soon. Crawford's face twisted. He looked at Hannah with pure hatred. You think you've won, he spat. You're still a crazy woman who can't remember her own children's faces." "I remember their faces fine." Hannah's voice didn't waver. "I remember their birthdays. I remember their first words. I remember every story I ever told them and every song I ever sang." She turned to the judge. "My mind was broken, Your Honor. I won't lie about that. The river took something from me that I'm still trying to get back. But broken isn't the same as gone, and healing isn't the same as pretending nothing happened." She looked back at Crawford. "I was invisible for 3 years. I begged for scraps. I slept in the cold. I forgot my own name, but I survived. And now I'm standing here in this courtroom defending myself against a man who thinks he can take everything from me just because I'm not the woman I used to be." Her voice rose. "Well, I ain't the woman I used to be. I'm something else now. Something that knows what it's like to lose everything and start over. Something that ain't afraid of men like Silas Crawford." She turned back to Finch. "Your Honor, I ain't asking you to believe I'm perfect. I'm asking you to believe I'm human. I got scars. I got gaps in my memory. I got nights where the water comes back and I can't breathe. But I also got a husband who loves me. 3 sons who need me. A home I'm trying to remember." Her voice cracked. "Please don't take that away from me again." The courtroom was silent. Finch stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the documents in his hand. At Crawford, red-faced and furious. At the lawyer shuffling papers nervously. "This court will recess for 1 hour," Finch announced. "I will review the evidence and render my decision." He stood and left through the side door. The hour felt like a year. Hannah sat between Colton and the Triplets on a bench outside the courtroom. Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to say. Eli held his mother's hand. Caleb leaned against her shoulder. Samuel sat on the floor at her feet, head bowed. "You were brave, Mama," Eli finally said. "I was terrified." "That's what brave means." Hannah laughed softly. It came out shaky. "When did you get so smart?" "I learned it from you." The door opened. "Court is back in session," the bailiff announced. They filed back inside. Hannah took her place. Colton stood right behind her, close enough to touch. Finch entered and sat down heavily. His face gave nothing away. "I've reviewed the evidence," he said, "and I've considered the testimony presented today." He looked at Crawford. "Mr. Crawford, I'm recommending that the territorial prosecutor investigate the circumstances surrounding the original complaint filed against Mrs. Mercer. The documents provided by Mr. Mercer raise serious questions about your motives." Crawford's face went gray. Finch turned to Hannah. "Mrs. Mercer, you've experienced a trauma that most people cannot imagine. Your memory has been damaged. Your mind has been wounded." Hannah held her breath. "But wounded is not incompetent. Damaged is not destroyed." Finch's voice softened slightly. "You spoke today with clarity, with passion, and with a fierce love for your family. Those are not the words of a woman who has lost her mind." He picked up his gavel. "This court finds Hannah Mercer to be of sound mind and competent to make her own decisions. The petition for commitment is denied." The gavel fell. Hannah's knees buckled. Colton caught her, pulling her close. The Triplets rushed forward, wrapping their arms around both of them. "It's over," Colton breathed into her hair. "It's over." But Hannah was looking across the courtroom. Crawford stood frozen, his lawyer already backing away from him. His face was purple with rage. "This ain't over," Crawford snarled. "You think a piece of paper protects you? You think, Mr. Crawford." Finch's voice cracked like a whip. "One more word, and I'll have you arrested for contempt." Crawford's mouth snapped shut. He turned and stormed out of the courtroom, shoving past people in the gallery. Ruth Brennan caught Hannah's eye as she passed. "You did good, honey," Ruth said softly. "Real good." Hannah nodded too, overwhelmed to speak. They walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun. The air felt different, cleaner, like something heavy had been lifted. "Pop!" Samuel tugged on Colton's sleeve. "Is that man gonna leave us alone now?" Colton looked in the direction Crawford had gone. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Men like that don't give up easy." Hannah straightened her spine. "Then we don't give up either." That night, they stayed at the boarding house one more time before the long journey home. Hannah tucked the triplets into bed, smoothing hair from foreheads, kissing each cheek. "Mama," Caleb asked sleepily, "are you happy?" Hannah thought about the question. "I'm getting there," she finally said. "Every day a little more." She closed the door softly and found Colton waiting in the hallway. The boys asleep. Almost. They walked to their room together. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed. "Something's bothering you," Colton said. "Crawford's face. When he left. He's angry. He lost." "No." Hannah shook her head. "It was more than anger. It was planning. He's already thinking about what comes next." Colton sat beside her. "Whatever comes next, we'll handle it." "Will we?" "We handled today." Hannah looked at him, at this man who had buried her and mourned her and somehow found her again. "Colton, what if I never get all of it back? What if there are pieces of me that are just gone?" He took her face in his hands. "Then we build new pieces, better ones." He kissed her forehead. "I fell in love with you once, Hannah Mercer. I can do it again." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm starting to remember why I married you. Because I was handsome. Because you were stubborn." She laughed through her tears. "Too stubborn to let me say no." "Still am." She leaned into him, letting his arms wrap around her. "Colton, yeah, thank you for not giving up on me." He held her tighter. "Never," he whispered. "Not ever." Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant. And somewhere in the darkness, Silas Crawford sat in a saloon drinking whiskey and writing another letter. This one wasn't to a judge. This one was to men who didn't care about courts or laws or evidence. Men who solved problems in simpler ways. They came home to trouble. Jesse met them at the gate, his face tight with worry. "Someone's been here," he said. "Last night, cut the fence on the north pasture, let out 30 head of cattle." Colton's jaw clenched. "Crawford. Can't prove it." Jesse spat in the dirt. "But yeah, Crawford." Hannah climbed down from the wagon, the triplets close behind her. "Anyone hurt?" "No, ma'am, but it took the boys all morning to round up the cattle. Lost 2 calves to coyotes before we could get to them." Colton helped Hannah down. His hands were gentle, but his eyes were hard. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. "He's gonna make our lives hell." "Let him try." Colton looked at his wife. She was pale from the journey, dark circles under her eyes, but her voice was steady. "Hannah, I didn't survive 3 years on the street to be scared of some rancher with a grudge." She straightened her spine. "We fought him in court. We won. Now we fight him here." 3 days later, the well was poisoned. Samuel found it. He'd gone to draw water for the horses and came running back face white. "Pa, something's wrong with the water." Colton ran to the well and looked down. The smell hit him first. Chemical. Wrong. "Don't let anyone drink this," he ordered. "Not the horses, not the cattle, nothing." Jesse examined the water and shook his head. "Arsenic, I reckon, or something like it. Can you fix it?" "Gonna take a week to flush out, maybe more." Jesse looked at Colton. "We'll have to haul water from Miller's Creek until then." Hannah appeared at Colton's elbow. "The boys? They're fine. Samuel caught it before anyone drank." "Thank God." Hannah's hand went to her chest. "If he'd been a minute later..." "He wasn't." Colton pulled her close. "We're okay." But they both knew what this meant. Crawford wasn't just trying to ruin them. He was trying to hurt them. That night, Colton gathered everyone in the front room. "From now on, nobody goes anywhere alone," he said. "The boys stay close to the house. Hannah, you don't leave without Jesse or me beside you. I ain't a prisoner in my own home, Hannah protested. No, you're a target. Colton's voice cracked. I lost you once. I ain't losing you again. Hannah's expression softened. She reached for his hand. All right, we do this your way. Eli tugged on his father's sleeve. Pa, is the bad man gonna hurt Mama? Colton knelt down to his son's level. Not if I have anything to say about it. What are you gonna do? Colton hesitated. He wanted to promise his son that everything would be fine, that the law would handle it, that good always won in the end. But he'd stopped believing in fairy tales a long time ago. Whatever I have to, he finally said. A week passed, then two. The harassment continued, fences cut, equipment broken. A fire started in the hay barn that Jesse caught just in time. Colton went to Sheriff Avery 3 times. Each time the sheriff shrugged helplessly. I can't arrest a man without proof, Colton. And Crawford's got an alibi for every incident. Then what am I supposed to do? Wait until someone gets killed. I'm doing what I can. It ain't enough. On the 3rd week, Hannah remembered something new. She was sitting on the porch watching the Triplets play when it hit her. A memory so sharp it stole her breath. Colton! He came running from the barn. What's wrong? I remember. Her voice shook. I remember the night before the flood. Colton knelt in front of her. What about it? You were upset. Something had happened in town. Something with Crawford. Colton's face went still. What was it? Hannah pressed. What happened? Hannah. Tell me. Colton looked away, his hands clenched. Crawford came to the ranch. He said slowly. The day before the flood. He made another offer on the land. I turned him down. And he threatened me. Said if I didn't sell something bad would happen to my family. Hannah's blood went cold. You never told me. I didn't want to scare you. Colton. Her voice hardened. What else? He was silent for a long moment. The bridge, he finally said. Miller's Crossing. Crawford owns the land on both sides. He was supposed to maintain it. Hannah's heart stopped. He let it rot. On purpose. I'd been complaining to the county for months. Colton's voice cracked. The day of the flood I was supposed to cross that bridge. I was supposed to check on the Brennan cattle. But I went instead. Because their children were stranded. Because you heard they needed help and you didn't wait. Hannah stood up slowly. Her whole body trembled. He killed me. What? Crawford, he meant to kill you, but I crossed that bridge instead. Her voice rose. He murdered me, Colton. Or tried to. And he's been walking free for 3 years. Colton reached for her. We can't prove it. The hell we can't. Hannah pulled away. Who inspects bridges in this county? Who keeps records? The county surveyor. Then we find him. We find those records. Hannah's eyes blazed. Crawford tried to murder my husband. He destroyed my life. He stole 3 years from my children. And now he's trying to take everything again. She grabbed Colton's arm. I want him to pay. I want him to lose everything he ever cared about. Hannah. I remember what it felt like to drown Colton. I remember the cold and the dark and the terror. I remember thinking I was going to die without ever seeing my boys again. Tears streamed down her face. He did that to me, and I want justice. Colton pulled her into his arms. Then we get justice, he said, together. They rode to the county office the next morning. The surveyor was a nervous man named Hobart. He fidgeted when Colton explained what they were looking for. Bridge inspection records, Hobart repeated, from 3 years ago. That's right, Miller's Crossing. Hobart's eyes darted to the door. I don't know if I can. A woman nearly died on that bridge, Hannah said quietly. I nearly died, The county has a responsibility to maintain safe crossings. I understand, ma'am, but show us the records. Something in Hannah's voice made Hobart go pale. He shuffled to a filing cabinet and pulled out a dusty folder. These are the inspection reports from 1884, he said. But I should warn you. Colton took the folder. He opened it and started reading. His face went white. Colton, Hannah moved closer. What is it? The bridge was condemned. Colton's voice shook. 6 months before the flood, the inspector noted structural damage and recommended immediate closure. Then why was it still open? Colton turned the page. Crawford appealed, said repairs were too expensive. The county granted him an extension. He looked up. The extension was supposed to last 30 days. It lasted 18 months. Who approved the extension? Colton showed her the signature at the bottom of the page. Judge Horace Finch. Hannah stopped breathing. The same judge who just heard my competency case. The same one. He knew. Hannah's voice dropped to a whisper. Finch knew that bridge was dangerous. He signed off on keeping it open. And when I fell through, he covered it up. We don't know that for certain. Then why did Crawford go to him specifically? Why did Finch agree to hear the case in the first place? Hannah grabbed Colton's arm. They're working together. They've been working together for years. Colton's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place. Crawford's confidence. Finch's initial hostility. The way the judge had backed down only when confronted with evidence in a public courtroom. If we can prove this, he started, we can destroy them both. Hobart cleared his throat nervously. Folks, I really think you should put that file back. Why? Colton turned to him. What are you afraid of? Nothing. Crawford paid you, didn't he? Hobart's face went gray. He paid you to lose these records, to make sure nobody ever connected him to that bridge. Colton stepped closer. How much? How much was my wife's life worth? I didn't know anyone would get hurt. Hobart backed against the wall. Crawford just said he needed time. He said the bridge was fine, just needed a little work. A little work. Hannah's voice was ice. I spent 3 years thinking I was nobody. My children grew up without a mother. My husband buried an empty coffin and mourned alone. Hobart started to cry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But if I talk, Crawford will... Crawford will what? Colton grabbed his collar. Kill you. The way he tried to kill us. He has men, dangerous men. They showed up last week asking questions. Hannah and Colton exchanged looks. What kind of questions? About you, about your ranch, about where you ride and when. Hobart's voice broke. I think they're planning something. How many men? 3, maybe 4. They're staying at the old Morrison place east of town. Colton released him. His mind was already calculating. We need to go, he told Hannah. Now. They rode hard back to the ranch. Jesse met them in the yard. Where's the fire? Inside. Everyone inside now. They gathered in the front room. The triplets sensed the tension and stayed quiet. Even the ranch hands crowded by the door seemed to hold their breath. Crawford hired men, Colton said. Professional trouble. They've been watching us. Jesse swore under his breath. We can't go to the sheriff, Hannah added. He's either useless or bought. Then what do we do? One of the hands asked. We prepare. Colton looked around the room. From now on, nobody works alone. We keep weapons close. We watch every approach to this ranch. You're talking about a siege, Jesse said. I'm talking about survival. Hannah stepped forward. There's something else. We found evidence that Crawford deliberately let that bridge collapse. And Judge Finch helped cover it up. The room went silent. If we can get that evidence to the territorial governor, both of them go to prison. How do we do that? Jesse asked. I'll take it myself, Colton said. Ride to Cheyenne tomorrow. That's 2 days each way. You'll be gone 4 days at least. I know. Hannah touched his arm. Colton, if Crawford's men are watching, I'll take the old mining road. They won't expect it. And if they follow you anyway. Colton's jaw set. Then I'll handle it. That night, Hannah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Colton's breathing beside her. He'd finally drifted off an hour ago, but his sleep was restless. She thought about the bridge, about falling through rotted wood into black water, about the cold that had swallowed her whole. She thought about waking up in a stranger's barn, not knowing her own name. She thought about her boys growing up without her asking their father questions he couldn't answer. And she thought about Crawford, sitting in his fine house drinking fine whiskey, believing he'd gotten away with murder. Something shifted in Hannah's chest. The fear was still there, but underneath it something else was growing. Something hard and hot and old. Anger. 3 years of stolen life. 3 years of pain and confusion and loss. All because one man wanted land. Hannah got out of bed quietly. She walked to the window and looked out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, men were waiting, planning, ready to take everything from her again. Not this time. She turned and watched Colton sleep. This good man who had searched for her, mourned her, found her again. Who had stood beside her in a courtroom and fought for her right to exist. She wasn't going to let Crawford destroy him. The decision formed in her mind like ice crystals in still water. Clear, cold, certain. Colton would ride to Cheyenne with the evidence, and she would stay behind to protect what was theirs. Morning came too fast. Colton saddled his horse while the triplets watched from the porch. Jesse had the evidence documents wrapped in oilcloth, protected against weather. 4 days, Colton said to Hannah. 5 at most. We'll be fine. Jesse knows what to do. The hands are armed. The house is secure. Colton. Hannah took his face in her hands. I survived 3 years alone. I can survive 5 days. He kissed her, hard and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say. I'll come back, he promised. I know you will. He mounted up. The triplets ran forward for final hugs. Caleb handed him an apple for the journey. Samuel gave him a carved wooden charm. Eli just held onto his leg until Hannah gently pulled him away. Take care of your mother, Colton told them. Yes, sir, they answered together. He rode out. Hannah watched until he disappeared over the hill. Then she turned to Jesse. Now we get ready. Ma'am? Those men aren't going to wait for Colton to come back. They're going to hit us while he's gone. Jesse's face hardened. You really think so? I know so. Hannah looked at her sons. Get inside, boys, and stay away from the windows. But Mama, now. They obeyed. Hannah turned back to Jesse. How many guns do we have? 6 rifles, 8 pistols, plenty of ammunition. The hands know how to shoot. Yes, ma'am. Good. Hannah rolled up her sleeves. Then let's make sure when Crawford's men come they wish they'd stayed home. Jesse stared at her for a long moment. Ma'am, with respect. You remember how to shoot? Hannah picked up a rifle from the porch rail. She checked the chamber, tested the sight, and fired at a fence post 50 yards away. The wood splintered. Yeah, she said quietly. I remember. They came that night. 4 riders moving fast across the valley. Jesse spotted them first. Company coming. Hannah was already at the window, rifle in hand. The triplets huddled in the cellar with Ruth Brennan, who had arrived that afternoon with supplies and refused to leave. You're staying? Hannah had asked. You fed me when I was hungry, Ruth had answered. Even when you didn't know who I was, I ain't leaving you now. The riders stopped at the edge of the property. One of them, big man, dark coat, called out. Hannah Mercer. Hannah didn't answer. We know your husband's gone. We know you're alone in there. Jesse moved to stand beside her. We can take 4. Maybe, maybe not. Hannah's eyes never left the riders. Let's see what they want first. The big man called out again. Crawford sends his regards. He says he's willing to make a deal. What kind of deal? Hannah shouted back. You sign over the ranch, we let you walk away. You and your boys. No one gets hurt. Hannah laughed. It came out harsh and cold. Tell Crawford he can go to hell. Silence. Then the big man raised his arm. A rifle cracked. The bullet slammed into the wall 3 inches from Hannah's head. Down! Jesse pulled her to the floor. More shots came. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. Return fire! Hannah screamed. The ranch hands opened up from every window. The night exploded with gunfire. Hannah crawled to the back of the house, heart pounding. She had to check on the boys. Had to make sure another window shattered. A ranch hand cried out, Tommy's hit! Hannah froze. The man was on the ground, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. She didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed him under the arms and dragged him behind the kitchen table. Her hands were slick with his blood. Stay still, she ordered. Pressure on the wound. Yes, ma'am. Tommy's face was gray with pain. Hannah grabbed a dish towel and pressed it against his shoulder. The blood soaked through immediately. Jesse, I need help in here. No answer. The gunfire was too loud. Hannah looked down at Tommy. He was barely 20. Just a boy, really. Now bleeding out on her kitchen floor because Crawford wanted her land. Something broke loose inside her. She stood up, picked up her rifle, walked to the front window. Hannah, what are you? Jesse grabbed her arm. She shook him off. Cover me. What? But she was already moving. Out the front door, onto the porch, standing in plain view with bullets whipping past her head. Crawford's men, she shouted. You want to kill a woman? Here I am. The shooting stopped. The big man stared at her from his horse. Even in the darkness, she could see his confusion. Lady, you crazy. Maybe. Hannah raised her rifle. But I'm also the woman who survived drowning. Survived 3 years on the streets, and survived your boss trying to lock me up. You really think 4 hired guns scare me? The men exchanged looks. Last chance, Hannah continued. Ride away now, and you live. Stay, and I swear to God I'll put a bullet between your eyes before you reach this porch. The big man laughed. You and what army? Hannah smiled. And behind her every window in the house bristled with rifle barrels. This army. The men looked at the house, at the guns, at the woman standing alone on the porch like she'd already won. The big man's smile faded. This ain't over, he growled. Yeah, it is. Hannah's voice didn't waver. Tell Crawford if he sends anyone else, I'll send them back in pieces. The men turned their horses, rode into the darkness. Hannah stood on the porch until she couldn't hear hoofbeats anymore. Then her knees gave out. Jesse caught her before she hit the ground. Ma'am, I'm fine. She wasn't. Her whole body shook. Just give me a minute. That was the craziest thing I ever saw. I know. You could have been killed. I know that too. Jesse helped her to her feet. Why'd you do it? Hannah looked at the house, at the broken windows and bullet holes, at the home she'd fought so hard to remember. Because I'm done running, she said quietly. I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting men like Crawford decide my fate. She straightened her spine. This is my home, my family, my life. Her voice hardened. And nobody takes that from me again. From the cellar, a small voice called out, Mama! Eli's face appeared at the cellar door. Behind him, Caleb and Samuel pushed forward. Mama! Are you okay? Hannah opened her arms. Her sons ran to her, crashing into her chest, holding tight like they'd never let go. I'm okay, she whispered into their hair. I'm okay. We're all okay. But even as she held them, she knew the truth. This was just the beginning. Crawford had sent 4 men. When they failed, he'd send more. And somewhere on the road to Cheyenne, Colton was riding alone. Hannah looked east toward the darkness where her husband had vanished. "Hurry," she whispered. "Please hurry." Colton almost didn't make it. Halfway to Cheyenne, 3 riders appeared on the ridge behind him. He pushed his horse harder, veering off the main road onto trails he hadn't ridden since he was a boy hunting elk with his father. They followed. For 6 hours he led them through canyons and creek beds, doubling back, covering his tracks, using every trick he'd ever learned. His horse was lathered and stumbling by the time he lost them in the darkness. He made Cheyenne on the morning of the 3rd day. The territorial governor's office was a stone building near the center of town. Colton walked in covered in dust and exhaustion, the oilcloth package clutched against his chest. "I need to see Governor Warren," he told the clerk. "The governor doesn't see anyone without an appointment. Tell him Colton Mercer is here. Tell him I have evidence of murder and corruption involving Judge Horace Finch." The clerk's eyes went wide. 10 minutes later, Colton was sitting across from Governor Francis Warren himself. "This better be worth my time," Warren said. "It is." Colton laid out everything: the bridge inspection reports, the extension signed by Finch, Crawford's threats, the harassment, the attack on his ranch. Warren listened without interrupting. When Colton finished, the governor leaned back in his chair. "You're accusing a sitting judge of conspiracy to commit murder." "Yes, sir." "And one of the wealthiest ranchers in Carbon County." "Yes, sir." Warren was silent for a long moment. "I've had my eye on Finch for years," he finally said. "Complaints from other counties. Rulings that didn't make sense. Money appearing in his accounts that couldn't be explained." Colton leaned forward. "Then you believe me?" "I believe the evidence." Warren picked up the bridge inspection report. "This is enough to open an investigation. Maybe enough for an arrest." "How long?" "Days, maybe a week." "I don't have a week." Colton's voice cracked. "Crawford's men attacked my ranch 2 nights ago. My wife and children are there alone." Warren's expression sharpened. "Attacked? 4 armed men. We drove them off, but they'll be back." The governor stood up. "Wait here." He left the room. Colton sat alone, his mind racing. Hannah, the boys, Jesse. Were they safe? Were they even still alive? 20 minutes later, Warren returned with 2 men in military uniforms. "These are U.S. Marshals," Warren said. "They'll accompany you back to your ranch. I'm also dispatching a unit to arrest Crawford and Finch." Colton stood up. "When?" "Now." Warren extended his hand. "Mr. Mercer, you've done this territory a service. Crawford and Finch have been poisoning Wyoming for too long." Colton shook his hand. "Just keep my family safe." "That's exactly what we're going to do." They rode hard. The marshals were good horsemen, but Colton pushed the pace until his own mount was trembling beneath him. 3 days there. 3 days back. 6 days total. He'd promised Hannah 5. On the morning of the 5th day, they crested the ridge above the ranch. Colton's heart stopped. Smoke rose from somewhere near the barn. Riders moved in the yard. Too many riders. "That's not good," one of the marshals muttered. Colton didn't wait. He kicked his horse into a gallop and tore down the hillside. He heard gunfire before he reached the gate. The yard was chaos. Men on horseback circled the house, firing at windows. Return fire crackled from inside. A section of the barn smoldered where someone had tried to start a fire. Colton counted 8 riders, more than before. Crawford had sent reinforcements. "Federal marshals!" One of the marshals bellowed behind him. "Cease fire!" 2 of Crawford's men turned. One raised his rifle. The marshal's bullet caught him square in the chest. After that, everything happened fast. 3 of Crawford's men tried to run. The marshals cut them off. 2 more surrendered when they saw the federal badges. The rest scattered into the fields, pursued by ranch hands who'd been waiting for a chance to fight back. Colton leaped from his horse and ran toward the house. "Hannah! Hannah!" The front door burst open. Hannah stood there with a rifle in her hands, her face streaked with smoke and sweat. Behind her, the triplets peered out with wide eyes. Colton. He caught her as she threw herself into his arms. The rifle clattered to the ground. He buried his face in her hair and held on like he'd never let go. "You're alive," he breathed. "Thank God you're alive." "We held them off." Hannah's voice shook. 2 days. They came back with more men, and we held them off. I know you did." The triplets rushed out and crashed into their parents. For a moment, the 5 of them stood tangled together, crying and laughing and holding tight. "Pa." Eli grabbed his father's face. "Pa, Mama was so brave. She stood on the porch and yelled at the bad men, and they ran away. She did. She was like a warrior." Colton looked at his wife. At this woman who had been broken and lost and forgotten, who had put herself back together piece by piece, who had defended their home with nothing but courage and a rifle. "Yeah," he said softly. "She is." The marshals rounded up the remaining attackers, 7 men in total, bound and ready for transport. "Crawford?" Colton asked. "Not here," one of the marshals said. "But we've got men headed to his ranch now. He won't get far." Hannah leaned against Colton's shoulder. "It's really over." "Almost." Jesse walked over, blood seeping from a cut on his forehead. He looked like he'd been through hell and back. "Boss? Ma'am?" He nodded at them both. "Hell of a week." "You hurt bad." "This." Jesse touched his head. "Nah, just a scratch. You should see the other guy." Despite everything, Hannah laughed. Word came the next afternoon. A rider arrived from town with news. Crawford had been arrested at his ranch, caught trying to burn documents in his study. Judge Finch had been taken into custody in Cheyenne, found with $10,000 in his safe that couldn't be explained. "They're both facing murder charges," the rider reported. "The governor's calling it the biggest corruption case in territorial history." Hannah sat on the porch listening. The triplets played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the wind. Colton stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "It's over," she said quietly. "It's over. I keep waiting for something else to go wrong." "Nothing else is going to go wrong." Colton squeezed her shoulder. "We won, Hannah. We actually won." She looked up at him. "I remember more now. Every day a little more comes back." "Yeah. I remember our first dance. At the church social, you stepped on my feet 3 times. Colton smiled. 4 times. "I remember the night the boys were born. You were pacing so hard I thought you'd wear a hole in the floor." "I was terrified." "You were wonderful." Hannah reached up and touched his face. "You held my hand and told me everything was going to be fine. And I believed you." Colton's eyes burned. "I remember falling in love with you," Hannah whispered. "I remember choosing you. I remember building this life together." "Hannah, I'm still missing pieces. Maybe I always will be. But the important things—" She smiled through her tears. "The important things I remember." Colton pulled her to her feet and kissed her, long and deep and full of everything they'd been through, everything they'd lost, everything they'd found again. "Ew!" They broke apart to find the triplets watching with disgusted expressions. "Pa's kissing Mama," Samuel announced. "We can see that," Caleb said. "It's gross." "It ain't gross," Eli protested. "It's romantic." "You don't even know what romantic means." "Do too." Hannah laughed and opened her arms. "Come here, all 3 of you." The boys ran to her, crashing into her embrace. Colton wrapped his arms around all of them, creating a circle of warmth and safety and love. "Are we going to be okay now?" Eli asked, his voice muffled against Hannah's dress. "We're going to be better than okay," Hannah promised. "The bad men are gone. The bad men are gone. And you're not going anywhere." Hannah's arms tightened around her son's. "Never," she said fiercely. "I'm never going anywhere ever again." A week later, the town of Bitter Creek gathered for a different kind of occasion. Not a funeral, not a trial, a celebration. Ruth Brennan organized it. She'd spread the word through every shop and farm within 20 miles. The woman who came back from the dead, the family that wouldn't break. "You don't have to do this," Hannah told her. "Yes, I do." Ruth's eyes were fierce. "This town failed you, Hannah. For 3 years you sat on our streets and we walked past you like you were invisible. That ends today." The celebration was held in the churchyard. Tables loaded with food, fiddle music drifting through the air, children running and laughing. Hannah stood at the edge of it all, watching people she'd once known but couldn't remember. They approached her one by one, offering apologies and welcomes and promises to do better. "I should have looked closer," one woman said, tears in her eyes. "I saw you every day at the trading post. I just never thought." "It's all right," Hannah said. "It ain't all right. It'll never be all right. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for it." More people came, more apologies, more promises. Finally, Reverend Whitfield took the stage. "3 years ago," he began, "we buried Hannah Mercer. We mourned her. We prayed for her family. We believed she was gone." The crowd went quiet. "We were wrong." The Reverend's voice cracked. "We were wrong about a lot of things. We walked past her on the street. We threw coins without looking at her face. We convinced ourselves she was someone else's problem." He looked at Hannah. "Today, we ask for her forgiveness, not because we deserve it, but because forgiveness is what heals a community." Hannah felt Colton's hand tighten around hers. "And we welcome her home," Whitfield continued. "Not as a ghost, not as a stranger, but as one of us, a wife, a mother, a survivor." The crowd erupted in applause. Hannah's vision blurred with tears. She looked around at these people, flawed, foolish human, who had failed her and were trying to make it right. "Thank you," she called out over the noise. "All of you." The applause slowly faded. "I ain't gonna lie," Hannah continued. "There were times I hated this town. Times I wanted to burn it down and never look back." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "But hate's heavy. I carried enough of it for 3 years. I'm tired of carrying." She looked at her sons, standing with their father watching her with shining eyes. "I got my family back. I got my home back. I got my name back." Her voice strengthened. "That's more than I ever thought I'd have again. So yeah, I forgive you. All of you. Because holding on to anger would just mean Crawford wins. And I refuse to let that man take one more thing from me." The applause returned louder than before. Hannah stepped down from the platform and into her family's arms. That night, after the celebration ended and the guests went home, the Mercer family sat together on the porch. The triplets were half asleep, leaning against their parents. The stars burned bright above. "Mama," Samuel murmured. "Yeah, baby." "Tell us the story." "What story?" "The one you used to tell us, before you went away." Hannah's brow furrowed. She searched her memory, looking for the thread. "Once upon a time," she began slowly, "there was a horse who could fly." The boys nestled closer. "He lived in a valley surrounded by mountains. He was happy there. But one day a storm came and swept him far, far away." Hannah's voice grew steadier as the memory returned. "He wandered for a long time, lost and scared. He forgot where he came from. He forgot that he could fly. He forgot everything except the feeling that something was missing." Eli's eyes drifted closed. "Then one day he heard something, a sound from far away. It was his family calling his name, and suddenly he remembered." Caleb's breathing deepened. He remembered who he was. He remembered where he belonged, and he spread his wings and flew home. Samuel was already asleep. Hannah looked at Colton. He was watching her with tears streaming down his face. "You remember," he whispered. "I remember everything that matters." She leaned into him, surrounded by her sleeping children, wrapped in the warmth of a home she'd thought was lost forever. Colton. Yeah, I love you. He kissed the top of her head. I love you too, Hannah. Always have. Always will. Months passed. Crawford's trial was the biggest spectacle Wyoming Territory had ever seen. Witnesses came from 3 counties. Evidence piled up until the defense stopped trying to refute it. The jury took less than an hour to convict. 30 years in prison. No chance of parole. Finch got 20. Hobart, the county surveyor, turned witness for the prosecution. He got 5 years reduced for cooperation. The bridge at Miller's Crossing was torn down and rebuilt. A plaque was erected nearby, in memory of the lives lost and damaged by negligence and greed. May we never forget. Hannah stood before that plaque on a cold autumn morning, the triplets beside her. Why are we here, Mama? Caleb asked. Because I almost died here. Hannah touched the bronze letters. And because remembering matters. Are you sad? A little. She looked at her sons. But mostly, I'm grateful. For what? For you 3. For your father. For everyone who helped me find my way back. She knelt down to their level. Boys, listen to me. Life is gonna knock you down sometimes. It's gonna take things from you that you think you can't live without. But you can survive anything if you hold on to the people who love you. Like you did. Like I did. Eli threw his arms around her neck. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. More than the whole world. Hannah laughed and hugged all 3 of them. More than the whole world. More than the stars. More than anything. They walked back to the wagon together, hand in hand. Spring came early that year. Hannah stood on the porch watching Colton and the boys work with a new colt in the corral. The animal was skittish, but the triplets were patient. They'd learned patience from their father. Steadiness. The quiet strength that came from knowing who you were and what you stood for. Jessie walked up beside her. Beautiful day, ma'am. It is. You doing all right? Hannah considered the question. A year ago, she'd been begging on the streets of Bitter Creek, not knowing her own name. Now she was standing on her own porch, watching her family thrive. Yeah, she said finally. I'm doing all right. Good. Jesse tipped his hat. You deserve it, ma'am, after everything you've been through. Jesse, ma'am. Thank you for standing by us when things got hard. Jesse's weathered face softened. Ain't nowhere else I'd rather be. He walked back to the barn, leaving Hannah alone with her thoughts. She watched the sun climb higher over the mountains. Watched the light spill across the valley, turning everything gold. She'd lost 3 years to the river. 3 years of memories of moments of life. But standing here now, surrounded by everything she loved, Hannah understood something important. The past was gone. She couldn't get those years back. But the future stretched out before her like an open road full of possibility. And this time, she wouldn't waste a single day. Mama, Eli's voice carried across the yard. Mama, come see the colt, let me pet him. Hannah smiled and walked down the porch steps. Her boys ran to meet her, faces bright with excitement. Colton followed behind them, that quiet smile on his face, the one he saved just for her. You okay? He asked. Perfect, she said. Absolutely perfect. He took her hand and they walked together toward the corral, the triplets racing ahead, their laughter echoing across the ranch. The river had tried to drown her. Crawford had tried to break her. The world had tried to erase her. But Hannah Mercer was still here, still standing, still fighting for every sunrise. And nothing, not floods, not enemies, not time itself would ever take that away from her again.